Audio sermons from Peachtree Christian Church.
When God began to create the heavens and the earth was complete chaos, and darkness covered the face of the deep, while a wind from God swept over the face of the waters. Then God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And God saw that the light was good, and God separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And there was evening, and there was morning, the first day. And God said, "Let there be a dome in the midst of the waters, and let it separate the waters from the waters." So God made the dome, and separated the waters that were under the dome from the waters that were above the dome. And it was so. God called the dome sky. And there was evening and there was morning, the second day. And God said, "Let the waters under the sky be gathered together into one place, and let the dry land appear." And it was so. God called the dry land earth, and the waters that were gathered together he called seas. And God saw that it was good. God saw everything that he had made, and indeed it was very good. And there was evening, and there was morning, the sixth day. Thus the heavens and the earth were finished, and all their multitude. On the sixth day, God finished the work that he had done, and he rested on the seventh day from all the work that he had done. So God blessed the seventh day and hallowed it, because on it God rested from all the work that he had done in creation. The word of the Lord. Please be seated.
My friends, last month we worked through a sermon series on Christian practices that we do as a community. Starting today, we're starting a new series on creation. It's not only something that I've taken an academic and theological interest in, but I'm convinced that the stories that we tell, the foundational stories that we tell us not only about what's right and wrong, but it's also who we are and our place in the world. And so even the story of creation, which is not simply about origins, is weaved throughout all of Scripture. And it tells us something very important about God and our place in this world, and it tells us about what the nature of the good life is. More to come. Today, kicking us off on our sermon series, is the Reverend Gignilliat. Many of you know her, and if you don't, she is married, in fact, to our associate Reverend Brooks Gignilliat, and she is also in her own right a Reverend. She's ordained in the ministry, and she serves a campus ministry at Georgia Poetic. And I would like for you to give her a welcome as she graces our pulpit. Give her a round of applause.
Well, thank you. Thank you for the introduction, Reverend Dr. Longbond, and for the invitation. I would say thank you, everyone, for having me, but you didn't even know. So I'll thank you if you stay, I guess, to the end. I consider it an honor to stand next to our ministers that prepare this thoughtful worship experience for us every week. And I was reminded this week of the fact that that's no small task. There's a lot of prayer and work that goes into it. And it's hard. It's hard work. But I gotta be honest, this is still better than my normal Sunday gig. Being married to a minister, and, I gotta show face at the church. I'm just kidding. I'm so happy to come to church each Sunday. And part of that includes bringing my two lovely children, Sammy, 2 years old, Lola, 4 years old, in their Sunday clothes. And I know it's normal that parents don't always get to work together, and sometimes you have to get kids ready on your own. But there's something in the air on Sundays. I don't know what, but a few weeks ago, I thought I had it down for once. The kids came downstairs. They ate peanut butter sandwiches. Wasn't going to die on that hill. I said, yes, sure, whatever, you eat that. And I had them dressed, and I looked, and I had 20 minutes to spare. That's a lot of time. That's enough time to do something with my hair, and that is exactly what I decided to do that day. Called in the auxiliary parent, aka our television, and told them to watch a show, and I would be right down, just a couple minutes. And I I was about halfway through doing my hair when I heard my daughter say, Mama, Sammy got peanut butter on the couch, which was strange because I definitely washed both of their hands. So I went down to check it out, and when I hit the bottom stair, I was blasted with the smell of roasted peanuts. Okay, something has gone wrong. And when I rounded the corner, I saw in the place of my 2-year-old a fatted pig, wallowing in a mud of peanut butter. And it was on top of our leather couch, which for some reason has little pinprick pores all over it. So, yeah, it was not the best. I did shower him off. We still got to church. All of this to say, I'm thankful. I'm thankful to do this today. I really am. Okay, so let us pray together and refocus on the beautiful text that we get to consider today. God, we thank you for the way that you communicate with us and the way that your Holy Spirit shapes each person in this room and all of this world. God, we ask that you open our ears and minds to hear from you today, and may any words that leave my lips be ones that speak your truth and the peace of your Son, Jesus Christ. Bring us now to sit in your presence and take in the sights of your creation together. In your holy name we pray. Amen. Consider this. What if the story we knew of creation didn't sound so much like the reading we heard? What if it was a little more like this? In the beginning, there was nothing but water. Water in two great and terrible forms. First, an unfathomably large dragon, a sea goddess in charge of the salt waters. And second, her companion, an equally fearsome, unfathomable god of the fresh water. In the beginning, just the two of them, reveling in the silence, their waters churning and creating inertia. But then from this cosmic bubbling and mingling of the waters, more gods were created. They were lesser, but louder. And instead of bringing joy to their parents, their loud dancing and singing and outbursts enraged them. Imagine the Father, the God of the fresh water, deciding to attack. But he didn't take into account just how powerful the children he created were in their own right. He couldn't have anticipated their preemptive attack, and he was slain. The younger gods might have celebrated, except for the fact that the sea dragon still lurked. And now she didn't have the face of a caring mother, but the angry lens of a fatal betrayal. Imagine her striking again and again with her fangs. Nothing and no one could stand. Until our epic hero shows up. Finally, Marduk is born. And here, with his strong and courageous symbol of power, his bow, he shoots an arrow straight down the middle of this giant sea goddess and splits her into two pieces. From her flayed body, he plucks the elements that he wants to use to create the universe as we know it. And as one final gift or trick of cunning, he brings his brother and sister deities to freedom so they can finally rest and do exactly whatever it is that they want. So he creates human beings so that they can forever serve the needs of the gods. Do you like that? What if that was the story that we all heard in Sunday school as children? What kind of crafts would our kids bring home to us? Look, Mom, this is the spleen of Tiamat, the water dragon. This reminds me that I better serve her or serve whoever killed her. So that story, which I just briefly summarized, is one of the oldest known to humankind. It is the Enuma Elish, the epic creation myth of ancient Babylon. Babylon. Okay, maybe your ears perk up because maybe you'll remember that at a certain point in ancient Israel's history, they were conquered and utterly desecrated by the civilization of ancient Babylon. They were forced to live in exile in a new culture. And this was the creation story that was probably crammed down their throats. And then I need you to think about that. Think about the just confusion, the spiritual upheaval, the disappointment, and the pain. And let that sink in for just a moment. Right there, in that moment of darkness and loss, that is when many scholars believe that the Genesis 1 creation story, which was so beautifully read this morning, first came to the Jewish people. That might be different from what you grew up hearing, but it's true and it's compelling. Because if that was the backdrop, conquer and defeat and loss, if that was the time when this story came onto the scene, doesn't it matter a lot more how God chose to speak than it matters what exactly he said? What if what we read this morning was not a work of nonfiction meant to set the record straight for the ancient Israelites being bombarded by the stories of other gods? What if our creation story in Genesis 1 is a poem? So, Walter Brueggemann, a famous American Old Testament expert and theologian, once asked that question, and it's a really good one. Poems are designed to inspire. They use thoughtful language that calls together shared experiences as metaphors. They're repetitive in nature. They use weird words sometimes on purpose because they have more than one meaning. We didn't read our entire poem of creation this morning, but we got to see where it ended. We got to see that it was shaping and building towards something. And everything in our poem of creation leads towards the final day, the seventh, the Sabbath. Ah, yes, the Sabbath. Besides, don't make for yourselves graven images. I most easily forget. Remember the Sabbath and keep it holy when it comes to the Ten Commandments. On Friday, my team at Georgia Tech, the ministry where I work, we talked together for a while about the idea of keeping Sabbath. And in our discussion, it came up that the command to keep the Sabbath is probably the only of the Ten Commandments that our American society openly praises people for not keeping. We've justified and convinced ourselves into believing that hard work is the only way we can curate a good image of ourselves as people. And so rest is for the ones who have already managed to do that. Or it's for the lazy ones who will never be able to. But said in another way, I think our issue with the Sabbath is more serious than all of that. I think our issue with the Sabbath is really an issue with the defining characteristic of our God. Our issues with the Sabbath come down to our issues with grace. So this summer, Reverend Brooks and I celebrated our 10th wedding anniversary. Thank you, yeah. And for the first time since having kids, we had the opportunity to go on a trip, just the two of us. And Brooks was really gracious to let me choose because if he had it his way, he would have picked an all-inclusive resort and we would have chilled all day. But I had this vision of going to Acadia National Park in Maine. I wanted to hike all day and take in the northern coastline and then eat delicious lobster paired with a buttery Chardonnay every single night. And so he said yes to that, and it was awesome. We got to spend so much time together. Let me say that again. We got to spend so much time together. I believe on the second day, I was annoyed because Brooks didn't want to hike with me anymore. And he was annoyed annoyed because even on vacation, I have no chill. So we decided that we would part ways for an hour and then reconvene to have drinks and dinner. Brooks went to take a nap, and I remembered a book that I've been trying to read all summer, so I took it with me down to the pool. And the book is actually about grace. It's a classic book now, written in the year I was born, 1990, by Brennan Manning, and it's called The Ragamuffin Gospel. I've tried to read it before, and honestly, the book has been hard for me to get into. I work at a ministry that calls itself a grace-driven community, and I get a chance to talk with students a lot about the grace of God. So I just felt like I knew what this book had to say to me. I tell students, I need grace, you need grace, God gives it freely. But what was a bit new to me about this book was the perspective of the author. Because Manning was a former Catholic priest and also an alcoholic. Really open about that second part. And so while lounging next to a pool on beautiful Mount Desert Island in Maine, I ruined my own anniversary trip. I didn't see it coming because I really believed that I knew what grace was. So in the book, there's a story about one of Manning's trips to rehab. And in a group therapy session, another alcoholic is asked to tell his story, but he's made to do so truthfully. The man in the story is struggling with the first of the 12 steps. He would not admit that he was powerless over alcohol and that his life had become unmanageable. So after probing questions and blunt clarifications, the group therapy session leader eventually asked, "Have you ever been unkind to one of your children?" And the man's answer was unsatisfyingly vague. He kind of said that the previous Christmas Eve he had had some tense moments with his 9-year-old daughter. That was not good enough for the therapy leader, and so he called this man's wife and put her on speakerphone. And the story that he had to tell went a little more like this. That Christmas Eve, the man had taken his daughter out shopping to buy the best pair of shoes that money could buy. And they did that, and they had a really good time, and she made a really good selection. And driving home, kind of welling up with the pride of having lived this good experience with his daughter, the man felt the need to celebrate. And so they stopped by his favorite tavern on the way home. He told his daughter, "Sweetheart, I'll be right back, just a couple minutes." He left the engine running because it was almost sub-zero temperatures outside, and he locked the doors from the outside so she would be safe. But 9 or 10 minutes turned into 9 hours. Yeah, you can imagine that long into that, the motor stopped running, and when the man came back out, the car's windows were frosted shut, and the young woman inside was frostbitten terribly. She had to have fingers removed, and she lost her hearing. So when I read that, the book fell from my hand, and I walked straight back to the hotel room to go straight to the bathroom, because I wasn't sad by what I read. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even shocked. I was physically sick. I thought I may actually throw up from the absolute disgust that I felt at this man's story. The wine that night at dinner was sour, and even the lobster lost its luster. And Brooks and I turned in early. For weeks after that, some small thing would remind me of the young girl in the frosted car, and I would get nauseous thinking of this selfish person who could be so distorted and twisted as to think he had it under control. I finally got talked out of my funk the day that I carried Sammy back downstairs after the peanut butter disaster. Because it turns out I wasn't completely honest with you all about my silly little story before. When I first saw all of the peanut butter and the horrible mess it made, I screamed at my kids. I screamed, "Why? Why would you do this?" I dragged Sammy upstairs to shower him off. There were peanut butter fingerprints on the walls, the shower drain clogged. And when I came downstairs to deal with the couch and the floor, I stopped in my tracks. Because there was Lola, my 4-year-old, as quick as she possibly could, using bits of toilet paper to try and clean up the mess. And she said, "It's okay, Mommy, it's all going to be fine. I can fix it." Tell you what, I'm lucky. I'm really lucky I'm not an addict. Because when I choose myself, when I choose to leave my kids downstairs to watch TV while I preen as if it makes me any more sightly in front of God on a Sunday, I get the benefit of the doubt. My narrative is devoted mom who just for once needed 10 minutes. 10 minutes to herself. I don't get asked to divulge more and more details like the man in the story that I read because no one suspects wrong from me. Certain kinds of selfishness are just okay with us. But the truth is, if you kept asking me for details, you'd know that I didn't even consider how tall little Sammy's been getting, how far he can reach, or the fact that the peanut butter on the counter was sitting right next to the knife block. Maybe I almost lost a child's fingers over my vanity. So you might hear this as me being really hard on myself. And you could make the point that 9 minutes of neglectfulness is not the same thing as 9 hours. But I ask you not to. I challenge you not to. I challenge you not to give me a break for just a second. Don't come find me in gathering space and reassure me after this. Because I want to be honest with you right now. I want to be laid bare by the truth of how little I can do and how unconvincing the image that I have curated for myself really is. Because unless I can see that there's nothing I can do to deserve what God gives, I can never say yes to the gift of grace. Because you see, grace is a handout. It's a non-strategic act of charity given to a person who is going to waste it. It's the kind of thing that makes you question the sanity of the person who keeps giving it over and over again. And, along with these things, it is the modus operandi of the God of Genesis 1. If I cannot accept this, then I cannot keep the Sabbath. The prophets of the Old Testament tell us that if all the details were truly laid bare, the conquering of the ancient Israelites in Babylon, well, that was not totally undeserved. They speak of the idol worship that was happening, the abuse of widows, the neglect of orphans, the mistreatment of foreigners and marginalized people, all things that God begged and warned against. I'm so sorry. So it was really more of a picture painted of, we told you so, but you didn't listen, and now you have to swallow the cold, hard truth. Maybe the gods of Babylon were a just reward. Gods that made order happen. Gods that dominated because they had proven themselves the strongest. Gods that made humankind to be useful. But all of the imagery fits a little too well because the gods of Babylon were no different than us when it comes down to it. Think about it. When we make people around us earn our love and admiration, we choose something closer to these gods than to our God. When we ravage the face of the earth, bidding it to bend and break so that we can profit and make a name for ourselves, how different are we than Marduk, building the universe out of the corpse of his mother? In poetry, words matter. If something stands out as strange, then it's particularly important. And that's why it's important that the God of Genesis 1 is not the God of make there be exactly what I want, but of let there be. He is the God that with one breath gives us dominion over what he loves most, his precious creation, and with another bids us to come, rest, and take it all in with him. Our creation epic is really not that epic at all in the end. The way the poem is written, each day builds in complexity and goodness, and then at the very end, the very best day, the sacred day, is nothing. Or maybe I said that wrong. It's nothing that we can do. It's an invitation that God keeps issuing over and over. It's an invitation to rest, relax, acknowledge the beauty of creation, and let it be exactly as good as it is. It's an invitation to a promised land flowing with milk and honey. It's an invitation to sit, just sit, at the feet of Jesus. Don't fuss or worry about what you're going to fix for dinner. It is feed my lambs, which is the invitation that Jesus issued to Peter even after he made the biggest mistake of his life as a failure to follow, a failure to even acknowledge he knew Jesus. It's an invitation to be completely honest, to accept just how much we don't deserve a rest or even a second glance. When we do that, but we are still offered the grace of time with God anyways, the only thing we can say is, yes, please. People that say yes, please, when something good are offered are grateful people. And it's gratefulness, not ambition, that truly makes inspired things happen. Things like finding a way to encourage the last person who you think deserves it. Things like forgiveness. Things like contentment, true contentment with what we have. Things that restore our world. So go out there today and remember that God doesn't ask you to deserve or prove that you deserve a rest on the Sabbath. God asks you to stop and see how good it is. So go enjoy it.